Nice to see the choir fill up the pews. This is the time in our service where pre-COVID we passed the offering plate, which we no longer do. We appreciate your gifts. There are plates in the back of the sanctuary if you wish to leave your tithes and first fruits giving there, or we have other ways of giving. I invite you to join me in listening to Erica's musical offering. Please join me in a prayer of thanksgiving. We bring you only what is yours, Creator God, that you might use this offering and the giver for the building up of your kingdom and the glory of your name. Amen. The next hymn is number 136 in Voices Together, Santo, and as noted in the bulletin, we will sing it through once in Spanish and once in English. Scripture reading this morning is from the book of Joshua, chapter 2, verses 1 through 21. It can be found on page 169 of your Pew Bible if you wish to read along. Joshua 2, 1 through 21. Then Joshua, son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and spent the night there. The king of Jericho was told, "Some Israelites have come here tonight to search out the land." Then the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come only to search out the whole land." But the woman took the 2 men and hid them. Then she said, "True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. And when it was time to close the gate at dark, the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you can overtake them." She had, however, brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. So the men pursued them on the way to Jordan as far as the fords. As soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before they went to sleep, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that dread of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt in fear before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. As soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no courage left in any of us because of you. The Lord your God is indeed God in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, since I have dealt kindly with you, swear to me by the Lord that you in turn will deal kindly with my family. Give me a sign of good faith that you will spare my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them." Lost my place. "And deliver our lives from death." The men said to her, "Our life for yours. If you do not tell this business of ours, then we will deal kindly and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land." Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the outer side of the city wall, and she resided within the wall itself. She said to them, "Go toward the hill country, so that the pursuers may not come upon you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way." The men said to her, "We will be released from this oath that you have made us swear to if we invade the land and you do not lie this crimson cord in the window through which you let us down, and you do not gather into your house your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family. If any of you go out of the doors of your house into the street, they shall be responsible for their own death, and we shall be innocent. But if a hand is laid upon any who are with you in the house, we shall bear the responsibility of their death. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be released from this oath that you made us swear to you." She said, "According to your words, so be it." She sent them away, and they departed. Then she tied the crimson cord in the window. The hymn of response is, this is for the children. It's Voices Together 511. Come on, children, to the gospel feast, and we invite the children to come forward during the hymn for a time with Michelle.
Everything. This title alone sets the tone for what this book intends to do for readers. Bell's book creates an often new and exciting space to learn about and from an ancient book that people today have often walked away from because it's boring or confusing and contradictory, because of the violent stories scattered about its pages, or because it has been used to keep people on the outside of the church. Rob Bell, however, challenges his readers to grow in how they read the Bible. And if they find the Bible boring, then they aren't reading it correctly. This class of early 20-year-olds grasped onto this book in ways that I could have never expected teaching my first college class. Common themes started to rise up in our class discussions that centered around, why was I never taught this before? And I always thought you could never question the Bible or God. Well, the Bible is what it is. This taught thought process from these emerging adults around God and religion is one of the reasons I have seen people walk away from the church. There's not a place in the church to question why things are the way that they are, or to challenge the sacred cows that are not sacred to new generations of people who still desperately want to believe in and feel the presence of God. So when we moved on to our second book, Searching for Sunday, Loving, Leaving, and Finding the Church by Rachel Held Evans, I began seeing new themes rise within our conversations. Themes of, she's saying exactly what I've been thinking and feeling my whole life. And I'm glad to see that there are other Christians who are seeing and naming the contradictions found in religion. Rachel Held Evans, a lover of the Bible and Jesus, invited readers to build faith communities where they belonged as their true and full selves, rather than sticking with communities that continued to harm their identities, no matter how hard that transition out might be for someone. Now, both of these books were written well before COVID swept through our congregations, closing our doors for months on end. Even after opening back up, most churches have only reached 50 to 75% of church attendance of what they once were before COVID. And yet COVID is not what decreased church attendance. COVID is an easy excuse to give for the decline of church attendance, but COVID actually only allowed for an easier out for people who had already been wrestling with where they belonged in their communities. Now, because of COVID, these people could quietly leave without judgment, without pushback, or without having to tell the church why they were truly leaving. So instead of tending to the fire that was the church for them, they could now tend to their own souls in ways that the church was never able to for them. So this question of where do I belong is what Rahab brings to readers to wrestle with in Joshua 2. From the start of this story, readers are pointed to several identifying characteristics of Rahab. She is a prostitute and she is a woman. An interesting piece about this story is that in all of these verses, no one else is named except for Rahab, the female sex worker. For writers of this time, this is almost unheard of because other books in the Bible start off with these long lines of male-only genealogy. They leave women unnamed, or they name women through the men closest to them in family relation. But in Joshua 2, the only person named is the woman prostitute named Rahab. Now, these identifiers of Rahab are supposed to be shameful. They are supposed to put her in her place. These identifiers name that she is a woman of lower status, simply because she's a woman. And she's in an occupation of eyebrow-raising behavior that people, men in the community, however, still seek her out for. But in spite of these two human labels that she was given, she was also given her name, Rahab. This name, Rahab, can be identified as proud one, which I find is an interesting comparison to her other seemingly shameful identifiers of a woman and a prostitute. I like to think that the divine was once again working in mysterious ways, letting Rahab and readers wrestle with the thought that maybe Rahab had nothing to be ashamed about after all. So as the story continues, we learn just how much of an outsider Rahab is in her community. Not only is she shamed for who she is as a person, but she also lives on the edge of her town, the edge of her community. Her house borders the wall of the city, and she also lives alone in the house located on the outskirts of her community. So Rahab shelters these men, hides them, and lies for them from the king who is looking for them. She tells them that she knows God is with them in mysterious ways. And finally, she asks for protection for her and her family. We learn in this story that the very things that people have labeled Rahab with are what enable her to save herself and her family. Because she is a woman, because she is a sex worker, because she is alone, because she lives on the outskirts of town, she is able to save herself and her family. She is able to house these men without suspicion because it's what she does for employment. She is able to talk with these men freely because there's nobody else in her home. She is able to barter with these men because her home was a place that offered easy and safe shelter because of its purpose and location in the city. Her outsider-given identifiers enable herself to be courageous for her and her family. Her outsider-given identifiers are probably what also instilled an unquestionable courage in her from an early age. She knew she had to make choices that went against the cultural norm in order to survive. Now, one of the things that I've tried to teach people is the importance of looking at biblical stories from various sides in order to get a fuller picture of what could be going on here. And looking at Rahab from the eyes of the people about to be destroyed in a genocide in Jericho, one could portray her as the villain or traitor in this story. She is the person who betrayed her community. She allowed the spies access to their community, and as a result, it was burned to the ground. This is true, but there is more to the story, because there's always more to a story. Because of Rahab's place in the community, she didn't have another choice, but she wanted to survive. She chose in this moment to live into her courageous identity as an outsider and survive. The genocide of the people of Jericho is a terrible story, and a whole sermon series should be devoted to it in order to analyze that part of the story deeper. And I believe it's not Rahab's fault. Saying that it is would once again blame women for all the sins in the world because of an apple, or shaming women for their occupation that they may have been forced into in order to survive, or shaming people for leaving their church communities when they have been shown year after year that they don't matter. Now, we tend to put blame on the outsider for being outsiders when it's not their fault. Systems have forced people into situations outside of their control where they are required to make difficult decisions in order to survive. For Rahab, her choice was to die in a burning city with a community who had pushed her out because of who she was. or to offer shelter to these spies and in return survive, offering her a new possibility of finding a community where she belonged in and was shown love. Rahab knew who she was, and in my opinion, she was not ashamed of it. She lived into her name and was proud of who she was, but she desperately wanted a community to belong into. The church, and specifically the Mennonite church, because that's the group of people that I come from, have done a really good job at creating these insider groups where people like Rahab don't belong. We do this by playing the Mennonite game, by putting in more resources to certain groups of refugees over other groups of refugees, and we do this by being comfortable in our churches. There are various reasons why people have left the church, yet the most common one that I have heard, especially from emerging and young adults, is that they are seeking an inclusive community that is safe and where they feel like they truly belong. They want to ask the hard faith questions with their church community, but they feel like their questions are taboo. One of the things that was monumental for my own faith journey was being a part of a church community as a youth that not only knew my name, but knew what I did in my free time, showed up to my extracurricular activities, let me ask all of my faith questions, and engaged me and my gifts within the church walls weekly. It wasn't just the pastor. It wasn't just my Sunday school teacher or youth leaders. It was every single person in that church. To be known and seen for who you are makes a huge difference in the life of a youth who is beginning to live out to who she is as a person. Young adults are on fire. They have passions that they chase after and questions that they want to investigate. They are not yet afraid to speak their truths to whoever will listen. But after years of noticing when communities don't also support their passions, or more often than not support them in superficial ways and say they honor their truths without actually helping to make that change, brings those truths into reality and the forefront work of the church, these young adults get burned and they leave and find communities who actually have shared values. Like Rahab, people leaving the church seemingly only have two options: to stay and assimilate to a culture that they had no part in building and no place to be who they are, or leave and find a community with shared values and beliefs. It's easy for them to do that in a community that they have shared housing with in college, but it's a lot harder to find that in churches filled with established small groups and Sunday school classes and committees that one has to figure out how they fit into. Unlike Jericho, the church is not physically on fire, though maybe some people might argue that it might metaphorically be on fire. But regardless, there is still time to make space for the Rahabs in our community, to make space for those that are lingering on the outside. And the difficulty with this task, however, is that it requires people on the inside to put aside what might make this community comfortable for them and to listen to what others might find more life-giving. It requires people on the inside to set aside some of their passions in order to make space for new passions to blossom. It requires people on the inside to do the hard work of going outside of their normal circles and getting to know people on the outside. The people on the inside are the ones who have to do this hard work. We can't sit and wait for people to show up to us in this community that we made comfortable for us, because our comfort means that those on the outside will be uncomfortable in these inner circles that we have created. A few common themes that I've often heard churches desiring are wanting a diverse church. And I wonder, when I hear this, what are the ways that you are already incorporating diversity into your worship services, and how much? We want more young families in church. And I wonder, what are the ways that your worship service is family friendly? Christian worship services are geared toward audio learning adults. But how are children celebrated and invited to belong inside your worship? There is a huge burnout among current volunteers, but no one is willing to take over those tasks. And I wonder, have others been asked what they're passionate about? Have you talked about putting some things down? Has the church changed in order to incorporate new people and passions? And doing these things might mean that the church looks vastly different for us moving forward. But it could also bring the church into a new territory of radically following Jesus in today's changing climate. It could also create spaces for the outsiders and the Rahabs and the people who are leaving communities to find a place at God's table where they belong. Because at the end of the day, is church meant to make us comfortable? Or is it meant to live out God's love for the world? Maybe we can talk about that in Sunday school.
Good morning. We will sing number 841 as you go out from here, and invite you to stand as you are able.
I have a kind of a long benediction, so I'd like to invite you to have a seat for this. I wanted to just throw in one more author for today. This is a blessing from Kate Bowler in her book of Uncommon Blessings. It's called A Blessing for When Faith Breaks Your Heart. So I invite you to open up your minds and hearts to listen to this. Blessed are you standing among the ruins of faith that once felt so sturdy, now turned to dust under your feet. The certainty you once had gone, the community you loved dissipated, the hope you held dear hard to find. Instead, what's taken up residence is the very stuff that seems counter to what you imagined. Disappointment, doubt, disillusionment, despair. In this new landscape, may you practice the courage to find the others who make space for your questions without easy answers, who celebrate doubt when it makes room for more faith, who search high and low for a defiant hope born amidst despair. Bless you, dear one, you who don't give up wrestling, who have eyes to see something new being rebuilt on top of what was. Blessed are you who walk away wounded, yes, but changed.